recording and streaming live, and we're on now. Okay, and I'll introduce myself again. So welcome everyone to the fifth meeting of the Special Legislative Commission to study and examine the civil service law, personnel administration rules, hiring procedures, and bylaws for municipalities, including municipalities not subject to civil service laws and state police hiring practices. Today, we're going to continue with presentations from commissioners who are going to explain the points of view of the organizations that they represent when it comes to civil service laws. And I want to thank everybody for your presentations. We're asking the presentations be targeted at about 30 minutes, and then we'll have some questions and answers because that will give us a chance to have everybody heard within what we'd like to see as maybe a 2-hour window, just out of respect for your time. I'm going to call the roll because it's going to help with the minutes. And if you're here, just indicate that. Marcella King. Marcella King. Michael Papani.
I'm here.
Tom Reddy.
Present.
Sophia Hall. Sophia Hall. And I'll come back to the top when we're done. Make a note. Okay. Neil Osborne.
Good morning, Neil's here.
Thank you. Larry Calderon.
I'm here, sir. Good morning, Chairman.
Morning.
And everyone.
Chris Del Monte.
Present. Good morning, sir.
Thank you. James Fona. Sorry.
Bona, present. Thank you. Good morning.
Yeah. Thank you. Jeffrey Lopes. Jeffrey Lopes. Stephen Gabriel.
Present. Good morning, sir. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Robert Quinnen.
Present. Good morning.
Eric Estepanis.
Good morning. Present.
Ronald Renault.
Present. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Richard Sweeney.
Good morning.
Good morning. Tom Lyons.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning. Secretary Poppy, I saw you on here. Good
Good morning,
morning.
Mr. Chairman.
Morning. Jesse Flynn.
Good morning, sir. Present.
Thank you. Jen Breaker.
Morning, present.
Kimberly Parr.
Mr.
She
Chair,
is-
Kimberly Parr, just posted in the chat that she is present. She just had to take a call for a minute.
Okay, thank you. Rep China Tyler. Okay. Rep Maria Robinson. Rep Patricia Haddad.
Haddad here. Good morning.
Thank you. Rep Whalen, I saw you here. Good morning.
Present, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you. Senator Moore, saw you too.
Here, Mr. Chairman.
Morning. Senator Edward Kennedy. Okay. And Hirak, I saw you here for Senator Tar.
Yes, Rep. Good morning, everyone. Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, I'm going to just go back to the top to see Marcella King. Are you here yet? Okay, and Sophia Hall. Jeffrey Lopes. And Representative Tyler. Oh, Representative Higgins. I don't think I called you. I'm sorry. Okay. You may not have noticed. Okay, I called everybody who is here, right? Okay. All right. Let's see. Everyone should have the minutes from the last two meetings. Let's take a motion for the approval of the minutes from 7/12/21.
Move approval for the minutes, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of 7/23/21?
Approve the
So
minutes.
moved.
Second.
Anyone? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so those two are approved. And let's see. Do we have? Okay. So I'm going to go, let's go right into the presentations. And the first presentation I have on the list is from Secretary Poppy for the Department of Veteran Services.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and everyone else assembled here. Thank you for having me on this call.
Secretary, if I may,
Yes, yes.
Chair Brady just arrived.
Okay.
Chair
Oh,
Brady, I just
Chairman
wanted
Brady, thank you very much.
to introduce you and ask you if you wanted to share a few words, and then we'll go right into Secretary Poppy.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I don't want to hold anything up. I know everyone's schedule is busy, so I'm happy to move things right along. So go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Secretary.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my plan is to just kind of give a brief overview. I'm going to say ahead of time, math is not my strong suit. So if there are any numbers on here that I need to adjust later, I will look at them. So am I able to share my screen? I'm going to try. Oh, it says,
Cody, can you help us? You will. Cody's
okay.
doing whatever he needs
Because,
to
you
do.
know, if I can't, I will, I'll just kind of talk through some of the items. Can you see them? Okay, all right. I'm going to try to go back to the beginning. Can everyone see this?
No, Cody, can you
No.
just be visible and help the secretary?
Working on it now. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Okay.
So as I was saying, as we wait and see if the technical pieces can come up, you know, we at the Department of Veteran Services, you know, our focus is on making sure that veterans have the best outcomes in terms of employment. And that one of the, you know, veterans join the military to serve their country. But obviously one of the incentives of being able, you know, of that military service and kind of when those promises considered made to them is to be able to apply for other positions and having a preference for that. So I will preface that from the start before I go through just sort of a brief overview. And I will apologize in advance if some of the information you have seen before it might seem redundant, but I just also want to make sure that I touch on everything. I'm also joined by Matthew Deacon on this call, who is our counsel. And so he can speak to more specifics that I may not be as much aware of. So can you see the screen now?
Madam Secretary, you should be able to share your screen now if you want to
Oh,
go.
okay. So, wait a minute. So what do I have to do now? Close it first or? See,
To,
I can see it in front of me. That's the problem.
if you go back to the Zoom call itself,
Okay, wait a minute.
at the bottom that
All
says.
right. Okay, share screen. All right. I want to make sure I have the right one. That's the problem. Okay. So this one, I am hoping. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. So I want to make sure I'm sharing the right, because as you know, you do several different presentations. And can you do it from the slideshow piece? Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so obviously the mission at the department is to advocate on behalf of all of veterans in the Commonwealth and provide them with quality support services and to direct an emergency financial assistance program for veterans and their dependents. You may have heard of this program before called Chapter 115, and that's the law that it's governed under. But veterans in civil service, obviously, veterans have a proven skill set, and that makes them ideally suited for civil service work. You know, they have a sense of service and commitment, discipline, integrity, responsibility. Veterans are able to work effectively in teams or individually, and they have experience dealing with difficult situations. They have the ability to problem solve, and particularly working sometimes with austere resources in order to solve those problems. And as we know from all of us that have worn the uniform, you have to have attention to detail. Just for a little legislative history of veterans' preference, Under, again, when I mentioned Chapter 115 and the 108 Code of Massachusetts regs, these are the Veterans Bill of Rights that we think specifically are more geared toward when you file for any benefit, that you have the right to get assistance. As you know, in Massachusetts, and you'll hear about it soon, there's a veteran service officer in every city and town. Very unique. No other state in the nation has that. And so they're able to get explanations of the services and written notices. If something is denied, they're able to get that appealed. And for all of us, they have a right to be treated with dignity, honor, and respect. And they can request and appeal hearings and expect confidentiality and fair and equal treatment. And so specifically, where it's covered here is public employment preferences under Mass General Laws, Chapter 31, Section 12, and then the ensuing chapters there. And so then in accordance with Chapter 31, veterans have preferences in the eligibility list in the following order: disabled veterans, and spouses or single parents of veterans who are killed in action or died from a service-connected disability. And so this legislative history is here, and that's to recognize that military service gives them certain qualities, discipline, courage, steadfastness, which recommend them as civil servants. And so here's some case law that was prepared here by Matt Deacon, pulled together that shows some of the background with this. And as I mentioned earlier, I've had conversations. I haven't been able to have broad studies on this as yet, but in discussions with colleagues at the Department of Labor, or whether they're in the National Guard, as we mentioned earlier, it compensates veterans for their years in uniform during that experience that they might, the other civil service might have been acquired. Here's where I'm going to preface that if the veteran demographic information comes from a variety of sources, and the area we use for the most part is veteran population, or VetPop population from the VA, and that's based on projections. So just please do keep in mind that some of this is going to vary as you see different places of the data, and that population data can always change. It's a projection for a reason. It's based on a current, algorithm that's used, but based on if you have another conflict or something else that may happen, or more people move to Massachusetts, that demographic could obviously shift. This is actually just the demographic of the Army. And this was a slide I thought I had removed, so I'm just going to bypass this one. So what I wanted to do is, based on VetPop data, just want to kind of zoom in on the range of the people in Massachusetts who are veterans that may be eligible for civil service positions in the public safety arena. So out of the 305,707 veterans, the age range, which I have seen that sometimes it's from 21 to 32 or to 38 in some municipalities. We kind of took that range to see who might be there in that eligibility category for these positions. That doesn't mean that everyone applies for them, but who just might be out there in that range. And that's where we came up with the 39,000. And then obviously mostly male, but 6,000 of them being females. And that, again, looking at this chart, this is not done as an overlay. This is done based on, as you see, starting in 2015 to 2004, ending in 2040. You see a shift in veterans altogether as the population is projected to be declining. And I say projected because we don't know that for certain. Significantly over time, there is a pretty strong projection of a decline in the white non-Hispanic veterans. However, when you start to look over to the right side there's actually a gentle shift up in who would be the diverse candidates for these positions within the veteran population. So I thought that was interesting to look at when we consider hiring veterans and veterans preferences. Well, where can we find veterans who represent all these other protected classes that we want to consider when we're considering public employment. And so within, those categories, the veterans are there. I think the question, what I was not able to find, and maybe someone else, when we can zoom in, with more data, with some more time, can find out within those age ranges where the diverse candidates may be for the eligibility. So, again, yep, this was an older slide. I think I might have picked up the wrong presentation. So I will certainly correct that when we do the final submission of this. But again, you can see that right now, predominantly, with the male population, predominantly white. But certainly there is a strong array of veterans from other races and ethnicities within the veteran population. And then females, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. You have to excuse me that I'm going to talk about women veterans a little bit more in this. Again, with the women still, predominantly white in the ethnicity, but again, growing over time as more women enter the fields. And I think that's something else that we can also discuss kind of in the future when even getting back to when people start their enlistment, when they come into the military. And as we looked at that other chart before, we can see that that other piece will grow over time. Women veterans are the fastest growing population of veterans in the Commonwealth and in the nation. So they are, 15 to 70% of the active duty population. And we just anticipate that to grow over time, because now that a lot of career fields open more to women, there's more opportunity for them. And since there's more opportunity for them in the military, hopefully that same opportunity will be there. Someone's got a hot mic. Hopefully that opportunity will be there for entering into the public safety fields as well.
Okay, check the text.
So then, talking about,
Mr.
I talked
Lyons, I
about the
think.
future, and I think some future planning that needs to be taking place that we all need to consider. And when I say this collectively within the department, within the military, within the veteran organizations and communities who you'll hear from soon, is, to start to identify those potentially diverse public safety candidates soon. Start to do it in enlistment. I think this has been discussed before. What we had not been able to break down is number of students in the criminal justice school systems that are going to school. I was able to get numbers of students in schools, but again, that would take some more research to actually go to the individual colleges and universities and find out how many veterans are in those criminal justice school systems, and then look at their race and ethnicities and the protected classes within there. And from there, we can get a larger pool of veterans interested in these career fields, and as well higher education, because they're using their GI Bill and they're using their educational benefits. And then we can promote that required education to combine with all that experience. Veterans bring a lot of experience to the workforce. Some of them have actually, during their deployments, they've been able to get advanced degrees, while they've been deployed. We have really appreciated the opportunity to be able to take the civil service exams during their deployment. And when I remember initially when I was in the National Guard, how they arranged some other tests for the veterans who were deployed. So we're really glad to be able to see that. And then I think we need to measure those results. Of any initiatives that we take. I did hear that one town had said that they eliminated civil service, and they had a wider pool of candidates, but I didn't get a chance to see how many veterans, how many minorities or women were hired as a result of that pool of candidates. So I think we need to be focused on what those results are. And I also did want to take this opportunity to share, I did reach out to my other states, neighboring states, to see what they're doing in terms of civil service. So, we have, for Vermont, their preferences, a 5-point preferences for jobs in Connecticut. They do have civil service preferences. They didn't discuss points. Rhode Island does have a veterans hiring preferences from their legislature in 2017. And New Hampshire also has a state and local hiring preference to veterans and unremarried surviving spouses and spouses of disabled veterans. I also heard, and I did not in time to update the presentation, but in Maryland, they give a 10-point preference for veterans on their civil service tests. So once again, as I'll conclude with the beginning, saying that our department supports all the efforts that will improve outcomes for veterans in any competitive employment opportunity. Veterans, as we do feel that veterans represent all protected classes. And I did give some information on contacting us and getting in touch with the department if there are any questions. So at this point, I don't know if you wanted questions now or if you want to wait until we're all done and then ask us individually.
Thank you, Secretary. I
Okay.
appreciate it. Thank
I
you.
will take my screen down. Thank you.
Unless there's an objection, and I'm fine hearing feedback on this, I'm thinking because the topics are so interrelated, the next speaker comes to us to represent the Veteran Services Association. They're so interrelated that maybe we have the same questions for the Secretary and for the Veteran Services agents. So again, unless someone has a specific question they want to ask the Secretary now, and I don't see anyone. So let's move to Commissioner Tom Lyons. I know you have a guest speaker. I'll just let you introduce your guest speaker and take.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. Joining me today is Ted Mulvihill. Ted is the Veteran Service Officer for the town of Norwood. I asked Ted to join me because he's been a VSO in Norwood for many years and well-versed on the role that the Veteran Service Officer plays in his or her community. Ted will also read a statement from the president of the Mass Veteran Service Officers Association. So Ted, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons, and good morning, Chairman Brady and Chairman Gordon, Secretary Poppy, and members of the commission. I'm extremely pleased and honored to appear before you today and represent the Mass Veteran Service Officers Association and the 351 cities and towns across the Commonwealth that we serve. For the record, my name is Edmund Whalen Mulvihill Jr., and I proudly serve the town of Norwood as the Director of Veteran Services and the Veteran Service Officer, a position I've held for the past 21 years. I had the distinct honor of serving as this association's president back in 2005, and today I'm happy to bring you the greetings of our current association president, Mrs. Roseanne Mazzucchelli Trionfi from Winthrop, and I hereby offer her remarks into testimony before the commission at this time. Roseanne writes, "The purpose of this letter is to express the strong support of the Massachusetts Veteran Service Officers Association for maintaining civil service veterans' preference in hiring. I am proud to represent an organization that, like the veterans population we serve, is becoming more and more diverse. The MVSOA represents local veteran service officers who work on the front lines of each municipality, helping the veterans of the Commonwealth and their families transition to civilian life. Today's veterans, as those from past wars and eras of service, are not looking for any handouts or special favors. They simply want and deserve an opportunity to build a life for their families who sacrificed along with them. Unfortunately, many now seek to weaken the primary avenue many veterans use to build a bridge to the middle class, civil service veterans preference. We should be proud that Massachusetts is the recognized national leader in caring for our veterans. We should also be proud that the Massachusetts legislature has made improving and protecting these hard-won benefits a priority in each session. Often well-intentioned but misguided proposals are dismissed by the legislature because they fundamentally are not consistent with our values as a Commonwealth. This has been the case in both tough economic and political times. It is with this steadfast commitment in mind that I respectfully asked the Special Commission on Civil Service to stand with veterans on this critical issue and protect veterans' preference, not just for today's veteran, but for those who currently serve. The MVSOA and our appointed representative, Mr. Tom Lyons, stand ready to work closely with every member of this commission and the legislature to seek a solution that keeps the faith with those who have President Abraham Lincoln said, borne the burden. And it's respectfully submitted, Mr. Co-Chairman, Roseanne Triunfi Mitsukelli, President, Massachusetts Veterans Officers Association. Commissioners, thank you for this opportunity to appear before you today, and I stand by to answer any questions or for clarification to the commission. I respectfully yield my time back to Mr. Lyons, and again, thank you for this opportunity to advocate for the brave men and women who have served our nation and Commonwealth with honor and distinction. As with all veterans, we are in their debt. Thank you, co-chairs.
Thank you, Teddy. Chairman Brady and Chairman Gordon, I'd like to read this statement myself as a member of this commission. Knowing they were off to fight in a war, they still said yes to undertake the duty to serve our country. Such is the truth that gave birth to veteran preference. It is the promise made to men and women who took time out of their lives to serve the armed forces during a time of war or conflict. When people say thank you for your service to a veteran, the words are always appreciated, but those words carry with it a promise that the thank you will not ring hollow, but rather reflect a genuine respect for their service backed up by more than words. Veterans returning from active duty face many issues as they try to assimilate back into civilian communities they left behind. Frankly, I can't understand how elected officials and town managers can say welcome home or thanks for your service on Memorial Day and Veterans Day, then proceed to cut programs and services these men and women have earned. I'm privileged to join you today and speak not as a combat veteran of Vietnam, but rather as someone who has had the good fortune of spending more than 40 years for both the City of Boston and the Commonwealth in service of veterans, seeking to re-enter civilian life. I can say quite honestly that my service changed the course of my life, but that's only because officials at both city and state were willing to recognize the value of my service. Be it helping veterans in need as the Deputy Commissioner of Veterans in the City of Boston, or offering them a safe place to live, counseling and job training as Executive Director of the New England Shelter for Homeless Veterans, or assisting in their journey to be able to afford their own home through Mass Housing Finance Agency. I do know something about challenges veterans face upon their re-entry to civilian life. I also know that there are many state and local officials who see their service as a plus, not a minus. It's been half century since I boarded a train out of South Station bound for Parris Island. Several boyhood friends made that journey with me. 3 were killed in Vietnam. Not a day passes when I don't think of them or their sacrifice. But when I got on that train many years ago, I was certain that the benefits my father and his friends fought for after World War II would always be there. I would very much like to believe that is still true, that stepping out of civilian life to wear the uniform of our country amounts to something more than a simple, hollow, thank you for your service. Unfortunately, for far too many people, their idea of veterans' preference is they prefer others to serve. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, that concludes our presentation.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. And what I'd like to do, if it's acceptable to the commissioners, is move on to our third presentation, and then we'll take questions. We'll invite questions to everyone. And this is the Disabled American Veterans. It's Commissioner Jesse Flynn, who I know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to share a screen for a quick PowerPoint presentation.
All right, Cody, you're on that.
So my name is Jesse Flynn. I'm the Assistant Adjutant Legislative Director of Disabled American Veterans. I'm joined by my colleague, Coleman Nee. He's the National 3rd Junior Vice Commander of the DAV and a former Secretary of Veteran Services. The Disabled American Veterans represents 67,000 wounded, ill, and injured veterans throughout all 351 cities and towns of the Commonwealth. And our core mission keeping our promises to the men and women who served, and empowering veterans to lead high-quality lives. Our presentation will show that the civil service system provides accountability. It ensures that veterans are not economically disadvantaged due to their service to our country. The number of veteran applicants to civil service is declining, and it's projected to continue to decline, but that the veteran community is continuing to grow more diverse and can be used as a tool to grow diversity within the ranks of police and fire departments. The fundamental purpose of civil service systems is to guard against political considerations, favoritism, and bias in government employment decisions. When there are, in connection with personal decisions, overtones of political control or objectives unrelated to merit, standards, or neutrality applied to public policy. The safeguards contained in civil service law are essential to accomplishing this goal and getting a qualified pool of applicants. Some would like to eliminate these safeguards for the sake of expediency and convenience. The DAV does not believe that safeguards protecting hiring from nepotism, patronage, and corruption should be removed just to hire faster with less oversight and more convenience for the hiring authorities. This is just an example of one of the pitfalls that faces cities and towns that revokes civil service in Chapter 31. This is a decision from yesterday where the State Ethics Commission found the chief of the Wellesley Fire Department violated state conflict of interest laws by interfering in the Wellesley Fire Department hiring process on behalf of his son. Wellesley Fire left civil service along with Wellesley Police in 2012. During that fight to leave civil service, the main argument that I could see made by both the fire chief and police chief was their inability to diversify while under civil service. But it's widely reported right now that 3 minority firefighters out of, in 2012, there were 3 minority firefighters on the entire Wellesley Fire Department. 9 years later, after leaving civil service, that number still sits at 3 minority firefighters out of 55. So like Franklin and almost all the other municipalities that we've looked at that revoked civil service on the grounds that they would be able to diversify, they failed to keep that promise and did not diversify. What is veterans preference? Well, the Commonwealth has long been considered the gold standard for veterans benefits and protections by veterans advocates nationwide. Our civil service laws have a long history of providing fair and equal treatment throughout the hiring and employment process. Civil service is especially important to the veterans of the Commonwealth. The long history of veterans preference has afforded returning veterans the ability for gainful employment and further their service to their community. Returning veterans face many challenges when seeking employment after returning home from their service. Both the state legislature and the Human Resources Division have made every effort to ensure civil service system is free from discriminatory policies and practices that would effectively penalize a veteran for his or her service. These efforts are clearly aimed at protecting veterans of all ethnic classes and ensuring their fair treatment during the hiring practice. The last paragraph here is from the United States Office of Personnel Management explaining what veterans preference is, and that it was enacted to prevent veterans seeking employment from being penalized for their time in the military. Veterans preference recognizes the economic loss suffered by citizens who have served their country in uniform and restores veterans to a favorable competitive position for government employment and acknowledges the larger obligation owed to disabled veterans. Veterans preference is an affirmative action program for the veteran population. One of the claims of municipalities that are leaving civil service is that they're going to replace veterans preference with something equal or close to equal of what they get under the civil service law. That's impossible. Veterans preference without civil service is not possible. The only true veterans preference is within civil service, because without a public eligible list with ranked applicants, there can be no preference because the preference requires a transparent, public, ranked eligible list. Municipalities revoking civil service do not have the ability to replace veterans preference at the local level. It is essential to have the oversight and authority of the Civil Service Commission to hear bypass appeals of disabled veterans and veterans that feel they were discriminated against or improperly bypassed for employment. The Civil Service Commission is an important part of the civil service system, and it protects veterans from discriminatory practices. I've just thrown out 3 examples of recent findings from the Civil Service Commission involving veterans. The first one was Mr. Morley versus the Boston Police Department. The Boston Police Department was found to have improperly bypassed Mr. Morley for employment by accusing him of lying on his application to the Boston Police Department regarding some things found in his military medical record connecting him to combat. because he appealed this and it was based on things that were found in his military medical record, it became public record, and the Boston Herald published portions of his military medical record in the paper. It was a big issue at the time. We actually used this as a catalyst to pass some legislation I'll talk about in the next slide, that amended Chapter 31 to protect veterans from having to be forced to provide military medical and service records. So it was a big deal, and it led to a huge change that wouldn't have been possible without his ability to appeal this decision to the Civil Service Commission. The next one is Woburn Fire Department and an investigation of the Boston Fire Department. Both were based on promotions based on military service, and that veterans on active duty couldn't be adversely affected for promotion because of their military service. It's just a small example of some of the veteran-related cases that the Civil Service Commission hears. They are not restricted to bypass appeals, but cover promotions as well. Mr. Quinnen stated during his presentation that most decisions of the commission uphold the municipality's actions. But the cases where the commission finds veterans were treated improperly or discriminated against are very important. And without the ability to bring these cases to the commission, veterans would not receive fair treatment. Chapter 31, Section 26 offers veterans protections under civil service from discrimination. During the BRAVE Act, we were able to amend Chapter 31, Section 26 to prohibit municipalities from requiring as a condition of employment of applicants to provide military, medical, or service records. We felt that DD 214s had a distinction of whether they served honorably or not, and municipalities shouldn't have been digging any deeper to try to prove that their service was, anything less than honorable. We were happy that we got this language added, and it's going to make a big difference going forward. But without the Civil Service Commission and civil service law, we wouldn't have been able to do this. And non-civil service municipalities are not subject to this provision, so they are able to force, as a condition of employment, applicants to provide private military medical records that do not have a civilian equivalent during the hiring process. We're representing one veteran right now who was required to provide over 800 pages of her military medical record just to be bypassed by the Boston Police Department. So even though we have this law in, there's some growing pains going on, but we think that it's very important to protect these veterans and their medical records from these discriminatory practices. And it's only available under Chapter 31. For my last two slides before I turn it over to Coleman, I just wanted to bring these up, and these are HRD slides from Regina Caggiano's presentation that we thought were just very telling, and that we can show that the drop in the veteran and disabled veterans taking the civil service exam actually correlates to the overall drop in veterans population in the state of Massachusetts. There was an 11.5% drop in 8 years between 2013 and 2021 in the amount of disabled veterans and veterans taking the civil service exam. We believe that that trend is going to continue bar any major conflict, so that veterans are taking up a smaller and smaller portion of the applicant pool. And the next slide shows that as the veterans and disabled veterans that are taking the civil service exam continue to drop, the minority of people of color veterans are actually rising. In 2021, they represented almost 30% of all the veterans and disabled veterans that took the civil service exam. And we think that that's very important. It's a 9.3% increase in 8 years. These numbers correlate with the overall veteran population change, and we can project that overall veteran and DAV civil service test takers will continue to decline, while minority veteran participation in the civil service system will continue to increase. Now I'll turn it over to my colleague Coleman Nee to present some additional demographic information.
Great, thank you, Jesse. Thank you to the chairs. Thank you to the commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity to present before you. And frankly, Secretary Poppy actually presented a lot of this demographic data quite ably and thoroughly. So I can probably run over some of this stuff. But there are some specific points that I do want to make just to sort of amplify what the demographic data that she was able to present earlier. She is correct that much of what we look at is the veteran population statistics from the VA. I also look at American Community Survey. I also look at the census numbers as well too. And so these are projections in terms of our veteran population, and not, and maybe subject to change. But I will put the caveat in telling you that over the last, I've been looking at these numbers now and analyzing them for the last 15 years, and the projections have pretty much been on target every year in terms of the decline. So, and that's during the height of, or at least the tail end of one of our, two of our longest wars in our history. So it's, there's good reason to put a lot of faith in these projections that they will continue. This slide right now represents one reason why I put so much faith in it. These are not projected numbers. These are actual numbers. In our population, veteran population change over the last 20 years, you can see Massachusetts lost, almost, just about 42% of its total veteran population. New England is experiencing a similar decline across our entire region. We could look at this nationally, and I'll show you areas of the country where this decline is occurring more rapidly. I will tell you that this is something that is recognized nationally. I literally just came back from a conference with the Disabled American Veterans, where we had an opportunity to hear from not only the Secretary of VA, Secretary Dennis McDonough, but also VA legislative representatives as well too. And VA is currently in the middle, at the beginning of instituting what's going to be called an AIR Commission. That stands for Asset and Infrastructure Realignment. And essentially what that is basically VA recognizing that veteran population is dramatically decreasing in areas so rapidly that the infrastructure of our VA system, our large hospitals, our large hospital network needs to be readjusted and aligned to meet that decline. So that is a significant challenge on behalf of veterans, but the fact that they're willing to do that, I think, shows that that the VA is also fairly convinced that the population will continue to decline and diversify over the next coming 25 to 30 years. Jesse? Again, yes, total veterans. We're about 5% of the population of Massachusetts right now, about 379,000 vets. And when you look at the number of them that are Gulf War veterans, from Gulf War to the War on Terror through Iraq and Afghanistan, that's about 1% of the population. If you go to just strictly from 2001 on, that's less than 1% of the population. And it's important to realize that where that stacks up and why in the past we've had large numbers of veterans applying for a lot of these jobs. When you look at World War II, when a lot of these benefits and services and our veterans infrastructure was implemented in the aftermath of that conflict, you had a country where 10% or more of our civilian population were serving in uniform. That number, in terms of we'll never see those numbers again. For a whole host of reasons, and one being the military just doesn't need that many people anymore. So, where we are stand right now is at less than 1% of our population is serving in uniform, and that, over time will correlate with the number of veterans that we have. We also have to look at average ages as well. So the average age of a World War II soldier was 26 years old, and the average age of someone deployed to Vietnam was 22. But the average age so just understand that for Vietnam, at 22 years old, and that's your average age, and you can't go much lower than 18, and certainly there weren't a lot of people forging birth certificates to get to Vietnam at 16 and 17 years old. So assuming from 18 to about 25 is most of your Vietnam veterans. Understanding they age into different phases of their life en masse. So, when they came back and were applying for jobs, you had large numbers of veterans applying for jobs because they were all at the same age range. Consequently, as they apply for healthcare, as they marry, as they buy houses, as they retire, as they're looking for, long-term care today, that's in bulk. But when we get to the newest conflicts over the last 20 years from Iraq and Afghanistan, the average age of a deployed service member in Iraq or Afghanistan is 34 and a half. So at 34 and a half being the average age, you're looking at going down to early 20s to, late 40s. But I would argue that at 34 and a half and older, you are not getting too many people in that older age range applying for civil service jobs on police and fire. I mean, most of those applicants are going to be under the age of 35 years old. So even half of your population from the latest conflicts isn't even considering going into these jobs. And then, you know, you look at the other half of them and their demographics and their opportunities. You know, it's, you know, with the post 9/11 GI Bill, many veterans and diversification of jobs in the military. You know, many veterans are coming out and taking advantage of their GI Bill benefits. They're moving into other professional careers. There is not as Jesse showed you from the decline in veterans taking the civil service exam, there is not a large push as a veteran total on these civil service jobs anymore, and we anticipate that number will continue to decline. Again, Secretary Poppy outlined this. You know, our female veteran population is going to, as our overall male veteran population declines, you know, our female veteran population, women veteran population stays relatively static here in the Commonwealth. And nationally, it actually goes up quite a bit. So, you know, we go from about, 11% of all America veterans being women to about 18 to 19%, you know, over the next 15 years. So, you know, in the Commonwealth here, well, the numbers stay static. The number of males dramatically decreases, so they become women become far more a significant figure in terms of their population number. Can you go back? There you go, Jesse. In terms of where they stand vis-a-vis the total vet population. The other interesting thing is really with minority and veterans of color. You see that there are significant increases. You know, we're looking at 10,000 total increase over from 2015 to 2045 in the number of veterans of color, and this is, you know, 10,000 in total. You know, not percentage, not vis-a-vis the percentage, but in total numbers. And this is in the face of an overall declining veteran population. So that number is going to continue to grow, and you will continue to have more and more diverse veterans to be able to help, you know, get and recruit these very well-trained and very qualified candidates in a way that will diversify our police and fire departments and our civil service and governmental positions, strengthen those positions, and certainly have them be more reflective of the populations that they serve and the populations of the Commonwealth in general. Next slide, Jesse. Again, yeah, the Secretary did this. You can see that the age distribution, it's not surprising that we're losing so many veterans. I mean, look, most of our veterans are 65 years and plus. So, you know, that's, no one's wishing anyone moves on. Hopefully we'll be charitable and say they're retiring to warmer climates. But you know, essentially this is you know, just actuarial data. It's the population is declining as these older veterans pass, and we don't make as many new veterans as we used to in previous generations. So that by 2045, you'll see a very you know, very evenly split veteran population. But again, the number of overall veterans less than 40 will continue to you know, decline slightly. Jesse, again, you know, we're looking at the, you know, projections in terms of minority veteran population. That is going to increase nationally. You know, from almost 10%, a little more than 10% in the next 19 years nationally. So that's a significant number. Jesse. Again, we look at the diversity of post 9/11 veterans. I mean, much more diverse population. You know, from both from women and racial backgrounds. You know, we look at, you know, post 9/11 veterans. You know, sort of at 13.3% non-white, non-Hispanic. And then you know, you get to post 9/11 veteran, rather 20.5% versus all other veterans. Hispanic, you get Latino, you get to 12% versus 5.7% of all other veterans. But then when you really get to the female category and the women veterans, that really makes you know, there's a huge some huge numbers there. I mean, you know, when you look at non-white, non-Hispanic female veterans in our post 9/11, that's like 33% of you know, of the total population, and Hispanic is 11.8%. So, you know, you've got some real diverse candidates coming out of the service, and and we know that women in particular and women of color are applying for governmental jobs and civil service positions at a far greater rate than their male counterparts. Yeah, Jesse, you can keep going. Yeah. You see, this is just a quick graph. You can see the growth in that, from 6% in 2000 to close to 16% by 2040 nationally. So, as a percent of the veteran population, and here we are. This is where they're seeking public sector employment more than non-veteran females. You can see that in terms of government positions, you have 34% of women veterans seeking basically government or civil service positions compared to 16% of their non-veteran counterparts. So they are interested in these jobs. They are looking for them, and as the force and veteran population continues to diversify, continues to be more reflective of our country as a whole. Really, this is a great opportunity to be able to recruit people out of a very well qualified pool of candidates who have been well trained with discipline and command structure, and also again, I think it's important to recognize the various disciplines within the military ranks. People tend to think of the military and think we're all ground pounders. The military has a wide number of MOSs and jobs, from administrative to logistics to supply to mental health to medical to transportation, military police. I mean, there's a wide array of jobs in the military that don't just involve the infantry or the artillery, and same with across all the branches of service. And the other thing too to remember is that in terms of community policing, in terms of the best candidates for the job from a perspective of bridging relations with our communities, particularly populations in areas where we know there might be a systematic discrimination or oppression or police involved instances. I go back to what one of my workers when I was at Department of Veteran Services from Iraq told me. He said that I threw far more beanie babies at kids than I ever did bullets at bad guys. And and a lot of that was we train our veterans to go in to make those community relations, to be connective with our communities, establish dialogue, and really avoid at all costs, if they can, any type of violence, any type of negative outcomes, and really want to build trust within those communities. And these are individuals who are well trained to be able to do that. So I think that's an important skill set that should not go unnoticed as we continue this. And with that, I think, Jesse, is that the end of my
Yes, that's our presentation.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. And so we're going to move on to our question session. And I just have maybe a few to start off with. And then if anyone wants to, any of the commissioners want to just raise your hand in the, what's it called, the reactions, I'll call on you that way. And I ask these questions from the point of view of what we as a commission are tasked to answer. So please don't read any agenda into the questions that I have. And this is to any of the folks who spoke, but I saw statistics on a national basis of the trends of veterans coming out with respect to percentages of Black and Latino or other minority groups of different races, as opposed to white people. Do we know the statistics with respect to Massachusetts? And I'm specifically interested in veterans who are in the Iraq, Afghanistan, the 2001 thereafter, because that's the labor pool that I think that our municipalities are looking to when they get their lists from civil service.
Mr. Chairman, this is Coleman Nee. That one slide that Jesse had up was a Massachusetts specific slide. So we're looking at in Massachusetts specifically, from 2015 to 2045, about a 10,000 veteran increase in terms of total numbers of veterans of color.
Okay.
And that will be the new veterans coming into that will be, I would say the majority of those will be under 40.
And I'm interested to hear your view on what effect the dwindling number of veterans entering the workforce, entering civil service, has on the overall challenges that we're tasked to answer, which is to say, it sounds to me like sort of a two-way problem or issue that it presents. The fewer veterans who are taking the exam would, I think, create, for example, a challenge if a particular employer, municipality in this case, is looking for a particular skill set. As you said, Secretary Nee, there are veterans trained in different specialties, but if you have fewer veterans applying, then you have fewer specialties represented. And so how does this dwindling number, do you think, affect the labor pool with respect to civil service jobs?
Well, I think you'll have far less. You'll have more opportunities for non-veterans, frankly, to be able to get those jobs. And I think that was, one of the points that we were trying to make. Vis-a-vis, there's been a number of comments, and arguments that have been made that, we would diversify our force, or we would do this, or we would hire more of these specific candidates if it weren't for this overwhelming number of veterans who were applying for these jobs and who had this veterans preference. But I think what we're trying to demonstrate is that there is no sort of big wave of these overwhelming number of veterans coming in. And in fact, it's a far more manageable program. Yes, the preference, as Tom Lyons and Teddy Mulvihill indicated, from two things. One is a kept promise to our veterans, and certainly we should do that. But also is as Jesse said, an affirmative action and an economic equalizer. Because for many of these folks, they enlisted or went in the military after high school. They served 4 or 8 years. They come back to civilian society, and their counterparts who did not serve have now 8 to 9 years into their careers. Many of these individuals coming back might have skills that are transferable to civilian sector, but certainly for those that are in the infantry, those that are trained on mortarmen or working in submarines in terms of or naval gunnery ships. These are not easily transferable skills. And so, we owe it to these individuals who've deployed on behalf of our country to, get them some economic parity vis-a-vis their counterparts, so they can, not come back and be without the ability to support themselves. I think as the number declines, it opens up an opportunity to, not only preserve the veterans preference, but it gives you more opportunities to look outside of the veterans preference for more diverse candidates and candidates that may bring specialized skills that you wouldn't find necessarily within your typical veteran applicant.
Thank you. And I'm interested if anyone else who spoke today has an opinion on that, because as I'm looking at it, we have various priorities to balance. And I don't know that anyone would disagree that we have a responsibility to provide safety in our communities. We have a responsibility to our veterans in the way that you've set forth, and I agree with that. And we also have a responsibility to our citizens seeking employment, because we see that there's a need to diversify. And so we're here in this commission, we're trying to balance each of these needs. So the dwindling number of veterans, it would seem to me, would make that more challenging. Does anybody else want to comment on that?
I'd just like to touch on that real quick, in that there hasn't been any data provided that veterans are overwhelmingly taking so many jobs that municipalities are unable to diversify. We've seen time and time again, municipalities use diversity as a reason to get out of civil service, saying that veterans preference is hindering that ability to diversify. But we haven't seen one example of a municipality that left civil service under those circumstances and then actually diversified their force. I've done a lot of research into that, not recently, but a couple of years ago, and it just seemed like the diversity didn't change, but the veteran hiring went to almost nothing. Wellesley is just in the news yesterday. Good example of that. They pulled out, they have the same number of minority firefighters as they did 9 years ago. The two chiefs from Franklin that came on last month kind of showed that the same thing. They were unable to diversify outside of civil service, or just didn't diversify outside of civil service. So the argument that veterans are somehow hindering diversity hasn't been proven. It just seems to be a convenient talking point for those that would like to see veterans preference go away.
Okay. Anyone else who spoke today have any thoughts on that?
I have my,
Terry?
Mr. Chairman, I think the point that I do want to make to this, in addition, is that when we talk about maybe not as many veterans are coming back, I do want to make sure that our veterans are encouraged to still apply for these positions. And maybe if they're not applying, perhaps maybe they're not feeling that they would be welcome because of some of these other concerns. And again, I'm still going to stress that we do have veterans that represent the protected classes within the veteran population. And I think the other point that I probably missed on when we, and certainly it was addressed, that when we talk about the decline of the population, the reason for some of this is because the most recent conflict that's actually lasted 20 years, we didn't create a lot of new veterans from this because we have deployed veterans over and over again, sometimes 4, 5, 6 times. So if you looked at another conflict where a veteran just did one tour overseas, for example, you might have 5 veterans, right, for that one person. So I think now, will that be the way? And let's hope there aren't any other conflicts in the future. But will the future look like that? That we don't know. So I think that's another factor to bring in there. But I do have to stress that maybe there might not be as many veterans applying for positions, but I would certainly hope that we have processes in all of our states and within the Commonwealth that encourages them to be welcome to apply. And so that when they go to recruit to go into a position, particularly women veterans that will have these skills and all of the protected classes, that they'll be able to know that they can apply for these positions and not be discouraged.
Thank you very much. There's one last question and then I'll move on to.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
if I can,
Yep.
Tom Lyons. One area that I see, along with the decline of the veterans who are looking at public service and having a son in law enforcement, being a police officer at any level today is more than a tough job. We are making police officers and others out to be bad guys. And so we may have veterans who join thinking they want to get out and become a police officer, but they see the way we are disrespecting them, that they may just change their mind. So it could be a reduction of veterans not wanting the job, but you may have young men and women in the community where they live who thought they wanted the job, but now decided that they want another career.
I appreciate that. My curiosity is more based on the dwindling number of veterans from those statistics anyway. But just one last question on a different topic, and then we'll take some questions. Is the promotional exam. I don't think our speakers talked about that. We're talking about entrance and getting jobs. The veterans also have a preference with respect to the promotional exam. Can you talk about the thoughts behind that and whether that's something we should look at?
Do you mean the civil service exam in specific? I mean, and that's what I believe that we stressed at the very beginning. And then I spoke about the other states and their experiences. Is one of the incentives when people join the military, is that they will be able to have a preference in hiring and a preference on the exam. So if that ends for some reason, then, obviously veterans could feel that, they obviously didn't have something that was, I don't want to say, use the term promise, but something that was an expectation that they would have a benefit for in terms of that preference.
Okay. And
I can speak on the promotionals a little bit. Yes, veterans do receive not an absolute preference or anything for promotions, but they do receive some extra points on the test. A lot of that is, I believe, would be based on their service and taking themselves out of even the job they have if they're in the National Guard or Reserves and they deployed while they were on that job and they missed their opportunity to further themselves, whether it be studying or for experience points. So that fills that gap. And I believe that that's why that exists. And it's not, veterans don't go to the top of the list. They just receive, I don't even know what it is, a point in the test, but it's minimal.
Yeah, I think it's 2 points on the test. So, okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, Ted Mulvihill from Norwood. I think another point that should be made is, at least from a VSO standpoint, from a Veteran Service Officer standpoint, it's an all-volunteer force these days, as we all know. And I can tell you that the reasons are many that a young man or woman would enlist in the military these days. There's considerations across the board, but one of the considerations, at least it's been my experience in my office, is that easily 1/2 of the veterans that enlist from my town have that expectation of veterans preference because they want to join the public service sector, public safety sector when they get out. And so I think the percentage is something that should be considered too. At least it's been my experience. Easily 50% of those that enlist from Norwood are looking for public safety sector positions when they get out. And then from a VSO standpoint, that discharge paperwork gets them 5 points on the examination. And then from my position, we also help them file for disability ratings through the Veterans Administration. If they are banged up, we help them get a VA disability rating, which gives them an additional 5 points. So conceivably, they could be looking at 10 points extra. And sometimes that makes the difference in hiring. If there's a tie in the civil service exam score, the 10 points from a disabled veteran standpoint puts them over the top and gets them the position. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Chair Brady, did you have any questions? And then we'll move on to the commissioners.
Just to everyone out there, I know we had a couple people a couple weeks ago, and some of it's been brought up today in regards to civil service. Some communities opted out of civil service and some are still in. What's the feel, if anybody wants to weigh in? I know it seemed like you mentioned you are in support of civil service, but any additional comments regarding that? Because that's a big debate that came up a couple meetings ago.
Yeah. Is that directed at anyone in particular? Chair?
No, if anybody wants to chime in.
I know Jesse has spoken.
Yes. So I just want to preface, is the question, what is the DAV or the veteran side of things for municipalities that pull out, and how does that hurt veterans, and why are we for civil service?
Because some communities opted to get out of civil service and some are still in civil service. So there's a debate, and I'm getting a feeling that everybody here on the line is in favor of civil service for the veterans, but I just wanted to make sure. So go ahead, Jesse.
So, going back to one of my slides in the PowerPoint, the only true veterans preference it really is within civil service. You have to have a ranked public eligible list to be able to even establish some sort of preference. You have to be able to have that list so that you can show that veterans and disabled veterans are going to the top of it for consideration for employment. When cities and towns remove themselves from civil service, that their participation in that eligible list goes away. So they may offer some sort of extra consideration for a veteran, but it's impossible for that veteran to prove whether he actually received that extra consideration. We've seen it in the past where municipalities will put extra weight on an interview and say that the veteran was considered first, but the other applicant did better in the interview, which is, hard to measure. And then that veteran is pretty much bypassed. but he can't even say that he was bypassed because there was no eligible list that he could show that. So our feeling on the civil service is it's just so transparent and public that it allows veterans to really establish whether they were treated fairly during the hiring process. So when municipalities leave that, the civil service system, that goes away. And we've seen problems with it, for years. And that's why we're so adamant about the civil service system and the veterans preference held within it. It's worked for veterans for decades. And we want to see it continue. There's debates on how we can tweak it or whatever, but I think that the civil service system is the only way to have a veterans preference. So that's why we're so in favor of it.
Thank you, Jesse. That's what I figured. I just want to hear it from you. Mr.
you, Chairman.
Chairman, I think Robert Quinlan's got his hand raised.
Yes. Robert Quinlan.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question for anyone on that's presented today. And that would be whether anyone knows whether any jurisdiction in the United States calibrates veterans' preferences in the civil service realm, either at the hiring stage or the promotion stage, according to the candidate's length of military service. In other words, each additional year of service might garner a candidate extra preference points. And my follow-up question would be, would that be an appropriate criterion to consider? And if not, why not?
So I do not know of any states that offer that type of preference based on time. I would shy away from that because, as Secretary Poppy said, we're having, soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines deploying multiple times in short periods to Iraq, to Afghanistan, and that may continue in a future conflict. So, I was in for 4 years and deployed twice in those 4 years. There's other guys that might have done 3 deployments in those 4 years. So if you just looked at the time in service, somebody may have done time in service in Las Vegas and they did 8 years, but the guy that did 4 years might have deployed twice to a combat zone. So I think you're getting into the weeds a little bit in that type of distinction, but yeah. So
We could look up that information. We could try to get that information for you. I know on the federal level, for example, there are certain grades, ranks that don't qualify anymore. So by virtue of the fact of sometimes serving longer and achieving a grade, then they're not in that level. But we could certainly look to that. But I think the point that Jesse has brought up is valid, that it's not necessarily sometimes the length of time, but it's the intensity of that time that may be giving very valuable experience to that person who is applying and competing for a civil service position.
Also, sir, thank you for the question. I think what the primary requirement for accessing veterans benefits and services in the Commonwealth and at the federal level is the character of service, not necessarily the length of time in service, but the character. They want to see that honorable discharge or under honorable conditions. That indicates that they did their job, they did it with honor and integrity, and they're deserving of veterans preference and accessing the benefits and services that they have earned.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation, and it'll be very helpful as we move forward and create our report. These are all issues that we need to get on the table. And so again, it's the questions that we're asking, the issues that we're raising are those that we've got to consider, essentially without agenda. Just we want to be able to talk about all these issues. Let's move on to reports of subcommittees. Senator Moore chairs the subcommittee on civil service municipalities. I think I see you here.
I am here. Hold on. Our next meeting is Monday, this coming Monday, and we have coming before us to brief us or to speak before us is the Massachusetts Association of Minority Law Enforcement Officers, the Boston Firefighters Local 718, and the town of Burlington. We also did a FOIA request, I shouldn't say FOIA request, we submitted a request for information to HRD, And we're hoping to get that back by the end of next week for the full commission.
What time is that on Tuesday?
It's Monday.
Oh, Monday.
Monday at 9 a.m. So obviously everyone who's part of the commission, please feel free to join us.
Yeah, and with all of these subcommittee, that's right, anybody part of the commission. And I will try to be there. If not, say hello to Burlington.
I will do that. Thank you.
Okay. Rep Higgins, I don't know if you were here. Are you here with us? Okay. Rep China Tyler, are you here? Okay. I know there was a discussion about the diversity subcommittee. Is anybody from that subcommittee? Can you tell me, have you met since the last meeting that we had?
Mr. Chairman, we have not met yet.
Okay. And how about Rep Haddad? I see you here on the state police subcommittee.
Yes, good morning, everybody, again. So we had a subcommittee meeting last week, and I think we're all putting it down into probably three big categories. Of course, the hiring, the how do we promote better, and of course the big diversity. We also talked a little bit about how the Quinn bill, or the lack thereof, has affected how many people are applying. And what was interesting with my group is that when people sign up for the test, they're not signing up. I guess you check off the box what you're interested in being considered for, and they're not checking off the box of state police as often because the municipalities in many instances have what's the right word? They have continued some form of the Quinn bill, so therefore it is more it's a better deal to go in with the municipalities. So we talked a lot about education and how you get a good value, and how you encourage people to get more education. So we have another meeting next week, and we're going to hear specifically from our commissioner, who's the representative from the state police, because he's the diversity officer, and he's going to give us a more detailed explanation of how they are trying to make diversity a bigger part of their process. So, and again, everybody is invited to that. I'll put up in the chat, or I'll have Carrie put up in the chat what that date is. I think it's a Tuesday at 10 in the morning.
That'd be great. I appreciate that. And that'd be important information to include in a report at the end of this session, because it's extremely relevant. Okay, thank you to the subcommittee chairs. Our next meeting is August 20th, and at that meeting, and that's at 10 a.m. At that meeting, correct me, by the way, if I'm wrong about 10 a.m., but I think these are all 10 a.m. Elizabeth Donovan is on, you'll correct me, but I think these are all 10 a.m. We have the chiefs speaking to us. The presenters will be Chiefs Christopher Del Monte, James Vona, Eric Estepanis, and Stephen Gabriel. And just a reminder that our next meeting after that is September 10th. This is all in the minutes. This isn't new, but it's just a reminder that our labor representatives from police, fire, and corrections, Michael Papani, Tom Reddy, Lawrence Calderon, and Marcella King. And then on September 24th, we will have heard from the different points of view. Oh, okay, thank you very much in the chat. They're all at 10 a.m. So September 24th would be the civil rights discussion, and that would include presentations from Neil Osborne, Sophia Hall, Jeffrey Lopes, and Richard Sweeney. Okay, so I look forward to those very robust discussions. And unless does anyone else have anything else to raise? I think that runs through our agenda. Okay, So I will take a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And next subcommittee from Chair Haddad, you see on the, is Tuesday at 10. Right, that's what that said, right? Rep. Haddad, Tuesday at 10, okay. And so, anyone opposed to adjourning? Hearing none. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for your time.